Hello, I'm CyberAct with Outlandishly Crafted, and I'm here today to talk about something very sensitive. We're going to talk about alphas. No, not the alpha creatures. This isn't Ark, We're going to talk about alphas and blending and materials and making things see through and glow that don't normally. And there's I want to do this really quick and easy so you can just jump into a guide and you can be like, oh man, I learned how to do this in 5-10 minutes. But if you want to have, say, a fish aquarium and you want to have different layers, so we want to have some glass, we want to have some plants, we want to have some fish, we want to have some water. We got to do it right. There's a method. So we got to go through the different options. So really quick, we're going to look at what we're looking at today. We've got over here, we're looking at how to make something see-through. You also see we have particles in there. So that's a whole nother issue you got to think about, because your particles are now part of this whole equation of alpha and see-through as well. So we've got a fish, and it's alpha. We've got plants, and they're alpha. We've got a ground that isn't alpha, the sand. We've got a anchor that's alpha'd. We've got a starfish that's alpha. We have water moving. You can see up at the top frame there's water animating back and forth. That's alpha'd. And then we've got just a hole at the top where there's nothing, and then a base. So we have altogether 3 different options. Now, glow in the dark is the same thing we're doing. You're just going to change one setting. So let's just assume that at any point, if you wanted any of these to glow, then you could do that as well. However, you can't have glow and alpha in the same thing, because you can't have it glow and be see-through. It's going to be one or the other. So you have to kind of think about that. I'd like to make the fish's eye, for example, glow, and what I'd have to do is add another cube or another bone that I could change the material for that would just be the eye. And so that's an option. That's probably something that I would do to advance this. So this is our fish aquarium. He's a cute little guy. If you jump, he jumps, and you can feed him treats and stuff that we won't go over. But I've got to just show off my pets, right? You can't just come into a game like this and then not see, the your kids' special abilities, like playing hide and go seek. Sometimes you want them to just hide. You can kind of see he's looking the wrong way, but he likes to dance. He can do a whole bunch of stuff. So here we go. We're gonna jump first into Blockbench, because that's where you guys all start, and we're gonna look at what does this just look like from the base. So here's what we have. You can see we have a set of bones that I call glass, and then inside the glass we have water, and we can turn off the water, and then inside the water we have a fish. The fish is actually in the water, so that's important. The fish itself is an alpha, so you can see the fish himself has an alpha material. One of the things you can do is come over here to your settings and set this to emissive, and it will help you kind of see where the edges of the alpha are. So if it was going to glow, this will help you see what would glow, which is kind of a cool thing. So you see the edge here, same thing. So these are all alpha. The soil isn't. That's just regular. The top isn't. Those are just cubes, so those are entity. If I know this is high def for what most of you will be doing, but in essence, all you're doing is, this is just alpha here. So say the water, for example, let's turn our water back on. So here's our water. If we wanted our water to just have more alpha to it, be more clear, we'd go to paint. We would turn up the size, for my example, really high because I'm doing high detail. And then the occupancy is what controls how see-through it is. So if the occupancy is really low, this is where these terms are all over the place. It depends on what you're coming from. So in this case, we're going to say occupancy at 255 is really high because that means we are putting the full amount of color, say red, into it. But if the color was occupancy 20, then we're only going to be putting a very small amount of color into it. So in this case, we want to add some color, but we can do it with the occupancy. So in this case, if I want to add some texture to this, I can then add in some texture, and you can just see it really subtly adding in, and I could make it more clear or less clear. Now, if you already have something here, say it's this one, and you have too much color like this, you want to get rid of some of that because you want it to be more like this, then you would use the delete tool. So you take the erase tool and you would decide how much do I want to erase. If you move this to 50 and you do it at 255, then you're going to erase a lot. If you use the soften tool, then it's going to help you and dither the sides, but you still are erasing a lot. So this is going to look like a hole where there won't be anything there. Whereas if I go back and instead I make this 50 and this 255 or whatever the max is for 100, you can see now, oh, you can see now it's all smooth. So it's a really nice removing of it. And if you do it all in one go, then it should look kind of smooth if you take your time. So you can kind of go through and make it nice and smooth it out. I would do it in a photo editor personally. That's where I do most of this stuff is just in Illustrator or in Photoshop. But when you're doing it at pixel level, it's really easy to just jump in and delete a pixel, or like the eyes, and just make the eyes glow with just the delete tool on one or two and a reasonable occupancy. And then you can always test it in the game and see how it looks there. Just make sure that you always save your texture because you're actually editing this texture. One of the things you need to be really aware of is if you're going to do this and you're doing it right in the software, make sure that nothing else is using the texture you're editing. Because if I come in here and I edit one side, say I want to write something, it's going to do it on all of the sides. So let me show. If I take this guy, I put it up to 200. I take this guy, I don't know what a reasonable number is, and I want to just write hello or hi. It does it on all of them because that's all of the faces are using this one. So you want to be aware of what you're changing or erasing or manipulating. So let's get back now to the code. We've looked at it in here. We have just our fish set up. For all of you that are wondering, the fish is just simply, let me take out the glass. So if we go back to regular, the fish is just panels and then applied here. And then I added fins, same thing, just a single panel. And then simply animate them. And I could even add, I could have the panels doing more animation to sell it more as well. Okay, so let's jump back now to bridge into the code. And so we're going to look at the RP of the fishbowl. And what I see a lot of people doing right off the bat is they're not setting the materials per bone. And I think that people don't know they can do that. And so they'll put in default, and then whatever they put in default applies to the entire entity. And that's not the goal here. The goal here is to set the material for the bone that you need. So if you see in here, I've got plants, I've got plant E, plant B, plant C. I might want one of these to glow, so I broke them apart because I'm going to do different variables, different variants of this. And so that way each plant can have its own, if it's alpha or if it glows or whatever it is. And same thing with the fish, they're separate, and I name them in here. And so because I name them in here, and this is also why you use lowercase, because the developers you give your stuff to are going to have to put it in their code. And if you use uppercase, it's not the same. It's going to cause some problems. So in here under material now, we put in each of those bone names. So pet fish, plant B, plant A, and then I've got them in here. And then the second piece of this, which people get stuck on, is the render controller and your entity they go hand in hand. And if you're going to do anything unique, you have to have a unique render controller. So we come over here, and now we have, and let me open these side by side so you can see them. So now in our render controller, we're calling this render controller in our file. We're not stealing in different entities. We're using its own. We're not using default because we're doing something custom. Now, if you were only doing default and you're only going to do whatever, then you're fine and you can share render controllers. But if you're ever going to take and do anything else or more advanced, then you need to have a separate render controller for each entity. So here we have our own render controller. We're just using the basic geo. And then in material, we still have default because we're using default for everything else. So anything that we don't define that's not a bone that we name, and it isn't a sub bone of them, that's why we have the stars here, then you just use default. So that's just entity, which is just solid. So it's a solid basic entity. And then for the glass, we have entity alpha test. For the fish, entity alpha test. And the only exception here that took me a while to figure out was for the water. So the water, we're using entity alpha blend because the water is behind an alpha. So we have the glass, which is an alpha, and then we have the water, which is behind the glass. And so by using blend, then it's giving us the ability to see it. But when I didn't do it that way, the glass just appears perfectly clear, and then the water doesn't show up at all. And so by using blend, and you're going to have to kind of develop this for your own add-on, but that gives you kind of a breakdown of how to get those layers to work when you've got multiple layers in there. Now, I didn't have to use blend for the plants or for anything else. They seem to just show up fine, and you can see that here that I only used blend for the two waters. And there's two waters. The waters just kind of overlap and rotate just gently, just slightly, which gives the impression of water movement. It's just cheating. So those two things right there give you transparency. So that's the alpha. They give you alpha blend if you're doing something behind an alpha. So you want to have something inside a box. That's a glass box, for example, or window. That'd be in the window, not on the other side of the window. So say you want to have water droplets. And then something else on the particle side of it, I couldn't get a blend particle to work inside the alpha blend box. I had to use an alpha particle to offset that. So that is something to keep in mind, that if you're having a hard time with your particle showing up inside another box that has a alpha or a blend, you may need to change your particle material inside Snowstorm to say alpha versus blend. That'd be something I would try. The other thing would be if you want it to glow. Now, one of the ways you can see that mine's glowing is this little trick right here that says in your render controller, another reason why you need a dedicated render controller, you have light color multiplier. So we're going to ignore the lighting of the world, so the sun, ambient light, all of that. We're going to ignore that, and that's what this setting does. So are we ignoring it? No, we're not. So we're going to allow that lighting in, but we're going to take the color lighting of our entity and we're going to multiply it. And that allows the entity to glow. I hate to say it's glow because it's a really odd type of glow where it doesn't produce light, it doesn't generate light, it just itself is bright. So it won't give the appearance of a light source very well, but it's visible in the dark. So kind of keep that in mind. It's different than emissive. So that's something that you kind of want to test back and forth. But this is a nice way. Say you have an entity that's just too dark at night and you need it to just be a little bit more visible to the player, but you don't want to add emissive to it because there is also a cost on performance side for emissive. You can use this as a way around that. So that's how I have it feeling like it's glowing. Like there's kind of an actual light source there, or the water has a natural glow to it. And there you go. If you wanted to make any of these bones actually emissive, you would just change the entity emissive alpha, and in Bridge, you get a full list of all of these. So if I come in and I say, whatever, I have a test bone, there's a whole bunch of materials you can use. So you have an entity static entity, you have some block ones, you have entity change color, entity alpha test, items in hand, whole bunch of them. It's really important that you kind of get an idea of what some of these do. There's also tint, the glints, because these are what are controlling some of those cool things that you can do with your entity that you might not understand or know up front, and a lot of those aren't listed other places. They're kind of a pain to find. That's one of the beauties about Bridge. So I hope this helped you out. We'll jump back into the game so you can see the fish aquarium again and where we're at. But the goal is, if you want to make something glow or you want to make it transparent, you have to change the material in the game. That's the key. You got to do it in the JSON or using Bridge in the render controller. If you're going to have multiple bones, you set it up that way. And then in your RP entity file is where you classify what each of them are. So there we go. We've got our fish. We've got him hanging out. He's doing his thing. He's giving us a little wave. He's doing another little hide. Oh, he's doing a spin. He's such a cute little guy. Oh, yeah. Do that backflip. I don't know why he just really... Oh, he's partying. Oh, he's playing dead. Oh, he's playing dead. So, this has been CyberX with Outlandishly Crafted. I hope this helped. If you have any questions, check me out on the Blockbench forum, Discord, whatever you call it these days, in the Bedrock support area, or you can check out my website at www.don'tpanic.biz or www.outlandishlycrafted.com. Thanks for watching.